Howdy, everybody. How are you today? Thanks for letting me come in and join you for a few minutes. Bob Langston from the North Carolina Zoo, also known as Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist. I'm standing here with my bird feeders today for an odd reason. I came up here and took a look, and this one is not empty. Now, to anybody else, that might seem like something that's like, why do we care? Well, here's why it's kind of something to make notice of. Typically, whenever my bird feeders are out here, there's a big oak tree right over here, another one right over there, and they have squirrel nests in them. So I'll have gray squirrels out here, and they'll climb up on these, turning them into basically a piece of acrobatic equipment. They'll get very, very active about cleaning all of the seeds out of my feeders. This one, and there's another one over here behind me. The reason it's unusual for me to come out here and realize, hey, my feeders aren't empty, means that something has either happened to the squirrels or they found another source of food. So I was kind of scratching my chin and wondering about that. Have they gone away? Has a feral cat somehow done one in or something like that? And I was out here the other day with one of the dogs, and I happened to look in a tree directly over there, and what I happened to see was this. You'll notice these little green globs up in the tree, and those are actually hickory nuts. The hickory nuts are finally starting to ripen up, and that's kind of a good thing. I noticed in this same tree there was a squirrel bouncing from limb to limb to limb, and he was trying to eat these particular hickory nuts. Now, I believe these are what are called mockernut hickory nuts. We have about 5 varieties of hickories that are found in North Carolina. Of those 5 varieties, you have bitternut, you have pig nut, and there's 2 different kinds of those. They're mockernut, which are the second to the largest, and then there are what are called shagbark hickories. Now, we know hickory trees are good for lots of things. If you grill, you probably use hickory because when it burns, it has a really nice smoky smell to it, and it's great on the grill. It's great if you're smoking a ham. If my father grew up on a tobacco farm, and they had smokehouses, and they would use smoking as a way to preserve meats over the wintertime. Hickory is also a great wood. It's used for a lot of things like axe handles or pick and rake handles and things like that. It's a good, strong, hard wood. Now these, on the other hand, are the nuts. I'll show them to you in 2 different ways. This one is what it looks like kind of here, and I'll show it to you a little bit closer right there. Now what you'll notice is that these are green, and this is the actual outer husk that grows on these. And when they're green, they're usually staying up in the trees. And when I caught the squirrel the other day up in the tree, trying to pluck these from where they were growing, way up off the ground, I realized that the reason they're starting to fall is because of the squirrels. And if you'll notice on this end, you'll see where there's some teeth marks in there, where the squirrels have actually started trying to gnaw these a little bit. I'll get that a little bit closer where you can see there. So hickory nuts, but this is just the outer husk. This isn't really the whole part of the nut. When you flake this green husk off, and I'll see if I can get one for you in a minute, there's actually a nut inside. Hickory nuts are delicious. Shagbark are the best flavored ones. It's a very, very sweet nut, but the problem is it's really, really difficult to get into. This is what the nut looks like when you actually are able to get the husk off of it. This is the hickory nut itself. And the wall of this shell is incredibly thick and really difficult. Years ago, I found some of these over in the Duke Forest and took them back to the office, and my boss and I were trying to eat them. The only way we could effectively break them up was to use the bench vise in a wood shop. So this is what the nut looks like. Now, once you get inside the nut, you'll find it has lots of little chambers. And you'll see these. This is actually, normally, this is what's full of the nut meat. They're in here. And this one has already been chewed open and eaten by the squirrels. Now, I have to say at this particular point, there are many people who have taken the attitude that squirrels are nothing more than a nuisance. If you have jaws strong enough to crack into one of these hickory nuts, you have some amazing jaws. Squirrels are very, very smart, and they've got a lot of behaviors that they've learned over the years. And one of those is you eat what's in season. Here's what I mean. In the summertime, none of the nut trees, the oak trees, the hickories, the pecan, any of that stuff I have around have got nuts on them. They're not ready to eat. That's when they come and they raid the bird feeders. So now that the hickory nuts are starting to ripen up, and these are actually ripening first. So they're coming ripe right now. You saw the ones up in the tree. You see the ones I have here in my hand. And they're becoming ripe and edible before the acorns in either of those two big oak trees back there. Once the hickory nuts are gone, a lot of times the squirrels will stash those. They'll eat them later. They'll bury them in the ground. Once the hickory nuts are either eaten or they're stashed away, that's when the squirrels will go after the acorns and some of the other nuts that ripen a little bit later. Now again, that's what the hickory nuts actually look like. You can get an idea for how big they are looking at my thumbnail there. And in just a second, I'll reach into my pocket and take out a pocket knife, and I'll see if I can pry the husk off of one of these for you. But when they first ripen, first get ready to pick, they have this nice green color. Later in the fall, it'll start to dry out and it'll turn brown, and it'll split right here on the bottom of the fruit. When it splits, that's when you can get in here, and that's when you can find those little hickory nuts as I was showing you. Now I've got a little small pocket knife here, and so what we're going to try and do is to actually get in here and split this husk so you can get an idea. Now if this was a walnut, a black walnut, the sap off of this husk would already be staining my hands. It doesn't look like it's going to come off willingly. So these are still kind of green. They're not entirely ready. But anyhow, so you've got this piece in here. This is it's full of moisture and everything else. So these actually have to dry off quite a bit before these will split. And once they do, they can come down. But in the meantime, that doesn't stop the squirrels from trying to get them. You get these marks up in here, and this is where the squirrels have gnawed on them. So hickory nuts. Hickory nuts are actually quite beneficial for a lot of animals, especially squirrels and any of the animals with stronger jaws. Squirrels are rodents. They have big front incisors, not unlike a beaver, not unlike critters like that. So they have this ability to tear these open and to get inside and enjoy the food that's in there. Nuts are great for squirrels and for a lot of the animals simply because the nut has an awful lot of fat in it. And the great part about fat, if you're a squirrel, is it gives you something that you can live on when it starts to get really cold. Now here you can see the chambers inside. And I'll try and get this other one down here. And this is the nut right here that's not necessarily open. Now if I crack this open, if I hit, the big problem is if you hit them with a hammer, you can crack them. But most of the time they just shatter and it's hard to get. So there's not a lot of meat inside here, but it's very sweet tasting. If you're really, really determined and you get a bunch of these things, you can actually crack them open, and you can get enough to make like a pecan pie, substitute in hickory nuts for pecans. It's great flavor. It's really, really sweet. It's almost a little too heavy for some folks. But that's just one of our trees here. Hickories are what are called, they're part of what's called the climax vegetation. Normally, whenever a piece of ground is sort of clear-cut, burned, or if you just leave it alone, it starts off with grasses and then smaller trees, pines and red cedars, and then later on you'll start to get hardwoods that come up. And climax is what's called an oak hickory forest. So we'd have oak trees, we'd have hickory trees, and that would be the main plant cover. So the animals that would live under these would be animals that could benefit from the hickory nuts, the various food, the acorns, and various other things. So that's kind of a little bit about some of the native ecology right here in central North Carolina. Now, I do mention the North Carolina Zoo. We are open to the public. This weekend is Memorial Day, it's Labor Day weekend. It's the end of the summer, not the beginning of the summer. Labor Day weekend, and we are relaxing our cap. We have had a cap of 2,000 guests in the park at any given time. We relaxed that to 2,700 this past weekend. It goes up to 3,000 coming up this weekend. You do have to make your reservations in advance, and you do have to have your tickets before you get there. You can do that by visiting our website at www.nczoo.org. You can also find out about all the restrictions and all the other issues that you need to do to make your visit to the zoo right now, here in the midst of the COVID outbreak, the best possible and the most enjoyable, as well as the most fun. Labor Day is coming up. You have a long holiday weekend for many people, so please take that opportunity to come and join us. For the North Carolina Zoo, I am Mr. Bob, your neighborhood naturalist, Bob Langston. So you guys please take care of yourselves, be safe, and I hope to see you again when next we have a chance to talk. I am your neighborhood naturalist.